solely, so heavy, ripe and ready beneath the canopy.
Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed the beginning music. Welcome in person and on Zoom. My name is Rita Marcalo and I'm the Artistic Director of Instant Dissidence, which is a socially and ecologically engaged dance company based in Cloughjordan Ecovillage. And you are very welcome to today's webinar titled From Orchard to Action, Arts, Ecology and Climate Resilience. So this is the fourth webinar, the fourth and final webinar of the series. And the series is titled, I'm just going to speak Irish now, I apologize in advance. It's titled Úlla, Dúlra agus Pobal, which means apples, nature and community. And this project is an education and advocacy project focused on apples, nature and community. It's funded by the IEN, the Irish Environmental Network. Our project partners include Sustainable Projects Ireland, the charity that manages Cloughjordan Ecovillage, with Cultivate, Seed Savers, and Instant Dissidence. So the project includes 4 webinars in total, the content of which will then be captured in an advocacy publication to be launched at Feilnanul, the Apple Festival here in Cloughjordan in September. And this will be a dynamic dissemination event that will serve as a tangible experience of the diverse elements covered throughout all 4 webinars. I will be facilitating today's session over the next hour, during which artist and producer Teresa Guschelbauer, dance artist Mia Di Chiaro, and dance artist Julie Lockett, they are going to present on the theme of today's session. So discussing how the arts can inspire action around climate change, biodiversity, and ecological resilience and food systems. And then after we listen to all 3 presentations, I will ask the speakers a few questions and there'll be a kind of final discussion between us. Great, so our first speaker is Teresa Guschelbauer, who is an independent arts practitioner focusing on community-engaged multidisciplinary arts. She's the curator of Clonmel Apple Fest, for which she devises projects and programs events across many art forms. Along with fellow Clonmel community members, she has planted and cared for several linear memorial orchards along River Shore. Sure. Apologies. Thanks. Okay, Teresa, over to you.
Hello, how are you? It's lovely to be here in Cloughjordan, and it seems a shame that this is the only, that I need these kind of excuses to come up here and to walk through your orchards, which will put our project in a very different context. I'm going to talk about what you could call an orchard tree installation in Clonmel, which is along the river shore, which coincided with the fact that a greenway was created along the river that goes basically from the west end of the town to the east end, and then beyond that towards Carrick-on-Shore, and I think there's plan to bring it all the way to Waterford in due course. I think I have to start at the beginning, which is, in 2017, there was yet another announcement that Bulmers was going to start fund a museum in Clonmel, a cider museum. They still have all the apple presses there, the whole shebang, and the storage vats, which look like out of a James Bond movie. You could just see, 2 guys chasing on top. It's just surreal. It's really beautiful. 7 years on, there's still no sign. I believe there is a design team has been appointed. So this is so I actually posted this photograph in 2017, probably in the early spring, and said, does anybody remember the smell of apples? Because up till about 98, trucks would come into the town center, into Dowd's Lane, to get the apple, would be pressed there by machines, but there was still like a lot of manpower involved. So I got all these stories, and between the fact of the richness and the diversity of the stories and just the realization that people just love to tell stories, I think I thought there's real material there to start a festival. So actually, first we started this research project which looked into the history of apples and cider making in Clonmel. So, but because there wasn't enough funding, or we got funding, but not enough, I actually came up with this sponsorship proposal, which was that, 17 businesses would sponsor 17 trees. And that went very well. And we went and planted them. And very soon after, a conversation started around, could people actually sponsor a tree or dedicated trees to someone? And, by then it was 2018 and we're looking at how to start a festival, and sponsorship is the obvious thing. So we got, a number of people came forward. I'm not quite sure. I don't think we solicited much. It's sort of the word of mouth spread. And I got in touch with tidy towns around, where to plant trees. And also the town foreman, Eric Ryan, was really brilliant in suggesting places. So that's, as I said, it sort of coincided with this greenway that was not officially opened yet, but that had a lot of green, grassy areas with some planting, but only so much. So we started with 2 clusters, one at the west end by the Convent Bridge, and another one in the park, the existing park that's also along the river. And so this is one of the initial groups, probably coincided with National Tree Week in March. And we would have done then many events where we would invite the school, like the presentation, which is near the Convent Bridge, the green classes, or the South Tipperary Mental Health Festival, to help plant trees. So over the years, we've had these clusters of trees planted, sort of 20 at a time. And that's now slowly has extended over 8 locations. Now, strictly, and you can see there's a map here, which I should really have put on its own page, which shows how the locations are along. And it's, I suppose, the big difference between the orchard there and the one here is that, it's in a public area, it's in a public space, it's actually the public space of Clonmel. It's a joint space that's owned by all of us. And people walk it very much with their dogs or even cycle. And then there's also kids coming from the school that go down to the residential areas that are further down. And so it's very much in the public gaze. And to me, it's quite interesting that people find this need to plant a tree that is publicly acknowledging a loved person, as opposed to doing it in their garden. You could just plant a tree dedicated to someone you love in your garden. But there's been a lot of requests for these trees. Up to 260 trees is my last count. And I suppose there is something quite lovely about walking along there, and you might actually know some of the people who the trees are dedicated to. Now, some of them are still alive. Some people are recently married, or I remember this couple coming down from Dublin to plant a tree for their newly born child, and it's now this beautiful crabapple tree that's absolutely thriving. So it's quite nice, to remember who the trees belong to and how they're doing. So so it's very much about people because of the trees being dedicated to someone, but also because of the people who have sponsored the tree and how important it is to them. And I suppose it's an opportunity to, well, you know, educate is patronizing, although, you know, I'm coming from a Teutonic background and you like to kind of be missionary about things. You know, making them aware, I mean, sometimes they put these amulets on them, you know, plastic stuff. So, and trying to sort of tactfully tell people, you know, can we skip the plastic, please? Or even, but at the same time, then there's other beds that are very much tended by people. So it's lovely to see them coming and cutting the grass around and planting flowers even and such. The other thing that's beautiful is the sites, because they are public areas. They are, and they're kind of, it's a bit of a liminal space because it's not really a parkland, but the council are really good at just leaving a grass verge cut, and the rest of it they leave. So there's now even little oak trees growing in between the apple trees. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's actually a good idea because, you know, it's gonna get a bit crammed in there. But you can see here on the, that this is the area at the very early stages when here down on the left, where there was very little planted. There was a hedgerow planted, but you see when it's flooded, the hedgerow is invisible. And then you can see two different stages. I think that's probably the next stage down on the right. And then above, it's already much more mature. And that's in the winter time when, you know, now these hedges are huge. And in fact, the tidy towns have learned how to lay hedges. So they're now looking at laying the whole of that length of the hedge so that, you know, it doesn't go too tall, but nice and thicker. And beyond that is a low grazing farm area, which, as you can see, floods quite regularly, and it's actually really changing. It's becoming more and more like a fen, and there's water there pretty much all year round in different degrees, and you see different birds come and go over the summer. So that's inland, and then you've got the walkway, and then you have another grass verge, and then you have this corridor of willow, and then you've got the river, you know, so it's quite beautiful, and it's quite dramatic, the views you can get. And it's quite interesting to work between, you know, this wild space or rewilded space, and then the sort of I mean, I suppose there's a job to kind of tend to it because it is a public space, because it's not a parkland, but it's a public space, so it does need to have a bit of decorum, shall we say, and you don't want the branches to fall onto the pathway and so on. And God forbid we should mention health and safety and such, but so it's interesting, you know, that that it's a public space, and you know, and that it is, but it's increasingly becoming part of nature effectively, because the trees are more and more taking over. And then, as I mentioned, there's other trees who are starting to spread, which is lovely. It means that it's becoming rich in biodiversity, and the soil is obviously regenerating. I mean, the other thing is that, you know, there's, in terms of the maintenance that I mentioned, there are all these gestures in terms of, you know, keeping the grass, because it's by the water, it's quite fertile, so there's a lot of grass growing. Just putting stakes occasionally if a tree is starting to be inclined to go horizontal. And and all our gestures are quite sought out in terms of, for instance, those stakes are reclaimed stakes from other trees that no longer need them, so we can, and trying to keep the trees from not becoming too unwieldy and too tall, because then it's a bit unmanageable. So there's a lot of pruning that's increasingly happening, and people are quite keen to learn, and I'm becoming a bit more confident in also showing, because over the years I got quite a lot of practice. So we often have just call outs for tree maintenance afternoons, and people show up, and sometimes there are people who've already been there, and sometimes it's just, so I suppose I was just thinking of, questions around why is it that apple trees, I think there's a sort of a special connection or even hierarchy, I thought, around trees and apple trees might be quite close to our hearts because of the symbolic and the fact that there's fruit and there's beautiful flowers. A bit like, with animals, you've got, the dogs and the cats, and then you've got the other animals. So, that attachment. And so it kind of caught the imagination of people, and I suppose in Clonmel there is this connection with apples anyway, so that's very much what we work with as part of the festival is, the stories and the connections to people, and we try to mine that for stories, and we have various projects around that. I just thought I put those questions out there in terms of, who would you dedicate a tree to if you were given, say, an apple tree, and where would you put it? Usually you put it in a garden. In this case, it's actually in quite a public area that's slightly off center, which is interesting as well. And you can see here, for instance, that's one of the vista across the river, beyond all the nature, the vegetation that's along the river, there is the town. And we're basically parallel to the town. And so there is this presence, and you can hear traffic, but directly where we are, there's no cars. So you're kind of in this nearly refuge, that's in the middle, very, very close to the town. How am I doing? So I just thought I'd leave you with a beautiful tree, and and what I love about this project, which has kept me going, is both the variety of the stories that are being told, and that I conserve, and some of them have been recorded because the Tidy Towns have actually mapped a lot of the trees, and that was the occasion for asking people, did they want to tell a bit of a story around the person? And then the variety of the locations and transforming of the locations, and the trees themselves all having kind of their own personalities, just like a dog would or a cat, that they actually, they have, it's really interesting to see that no two trees are the same, or very rarely, unless you really, really shape them to death, which would definitely not be inclined. So for the last year, I've been thinking about, how should I document this? And I thank you, Rita, for giving me the opportunity to share that. That might be the first step into doing something to maybe relinquish the project and hand it over back to the communities.
Brilliant. Thank you, Theresia. Thank you so much for that. Do you mind passing it over to Mia? And now, from a project that links stories and memories of a community to the actual planting of trees, we'll pass over to Mia Di Chiaro. Mia is a Dublin-based contemporary dancer, originally from the USA. She's a facilitator and an artivist whose work has been supported by the Arts Council, Dance Ireland, and the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and Create. She creates dance projects across Ireland that encourage communities to explore imagination, empathy, and care. Over to you, Mia.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be in Cloughjordan. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Rita, for the invitation. I'm going to attempt to take us through 3 different projects, kind of at whirlwind speed, that are bridging ecology and embodied practice and dance as my background. All right, so 3 case studies here. So, our formatting is doing a little choreography. All good? Okay, so I'm going to start off with plant playgrounds. And the context of this one is really coming out of COVID, this hyper kind of digitalization, and trying to find our way back, at least in an urban setting like Dublin, to find our way back in. Secondly, I'll kind of take us through a project called Move and Grow, which was with an eco-gardener in residence at Richmond Barracks, where I'm working. And then finally, a performance project within a really fascinating collective. Cool. So moving on. So the first one, plant playground. So this is coming out of, this time of really being isolated. I had met Dr. Sinead O'Connor, who's an amazing woman. She's, among many things, a Sufi whirler, a dancer and a gardener, and also a professor at the Open University. So we began we met right before COVID and then started texting and started coming up with these little experiments simultaneously. So we'd pick a time of the day and we'd, just do these sort of, I'd call them plant experiments. And then she folded in Catherine Hall, who was a dancer who was new to me, who's based in Bristol and runs Gather Up there. And the three of us just kind of set off. And then this call out came for Earth Rising, and that deadline was the perfect fuel to help us kind of hold some of these experiments and offer them and trial them with the public. So here we are. So yes, this was in October, and these were the yew trees that we located our installation within. So it's at the intersection of a few pathways. Our hope is to kind of get people at random. And there's Catherine Hall, who I met for the first time on the kind of launch of this. And she had traveled slowly from Bristol as well. Actually, an idea that I learned kind of from Rita as well. Okay, so we set up this very earthy, rugged installation. Sinead had created these beautiful wreaths out of sort of compost material, really kind of beautiful and inviting, kind of weird. So a lot of people come over and be like, what is this? And there we are there. So we set up a garland, you'll see on the left. And then this was basically our station, all materials being sort of biodegradable, a sort of choose your own adventure. So for this, we were really interested in the time scale of trees. So we were playing with 5 tree circles, 5 tree rings. So we had an ancient pot, past, present, future, and infinity. And within these crates, people could come up, we'd have a chat, introduce ourselves, and they could sort of lucky dip into either all 5 or just pick one that was calling them. And each one was an invitation that they could go off and have, just either a dance or a play with a tree. As well, you'll see a little kind of QR code here. As well, there's some kind of hanging ornaments as well. And again, biodegradable. People could, everyone's kind of on their phone at this time, connect in and then go out, leave the phone, and just be led sonically. All right. So there's a little close-up. So we have our 5 pots. We sort of took over the parking signs. Plant playground, welcome. And so people would go away. The entire audio guide was only about 15 minutes. So it was this idea of a really light touch. You don't have to commit to a big workshop. If you were just on your way, you could save this QR code. You could save it for later. And then people would come back as at the end of each invitation, you could either write sensations or like in one of the ones I'll show you now, we invite people to write to the great-great-great-grandmother of the tree that they're with. So some of those ended up back on the garland here for people who returned. And it was a really beautiful kind of intergenerational thing as well. We had kids coming up with the most beautiful, like poetic lines as well. Okay, so here are some of them. So this one says, thank you for the oxygen on the right. And on the left, we have hope, forward arrow, a muscle, forward arrow, let's activate. This one here says, roots reaching, limbs searching, I wish for openness, communication. So yeah, just very briefly, I'd say we don't have time to do it, but I can just give kind of a quick rundown of one of them from the audio guide. So this one was first an invitation to come to a tree, take it in either with your eyes, maybe your hands, and then to bring your hands to your own trunk and find your own equator. and to kind of explore the midsection of the body, and then to look at the hands, kind of taking in the lines of your dominant writing working hand and your kind of liberated, free other hand. Give them a good shake. And then we wanted to also bring them into what we call the pelvic pockets. So either putting them into your literal jean pockets or just resting them on your hips. And then breathing into that expanse. And then from there, we offered an imagining exercise of your own great ancestry, and then with the trees. And then to write on a slip of paper if there was any sensations. So yeah, this was I feel very strongly like that agency was super important for people, that they could choose their adventure, choose the depth of touch, if they wanted to go light or they wanted to go deep. And people who didn't want to engage also left with a little seed bomb kind of party gift, party favor. So yeah. All right, I'm gonna fly through. So the next one I want to share is called Move and Grow. And these are multiple 4-week series, one with children, one with teens, and one with adults. So I'm gonna maybe speak to the one with young kids who would have been maybe like 6 to 11, 6 to 12. And this is with Polly Rowley Sams, who's eco-gardener in residence. Oh my gosh. Like, I hope everyone gets to meet her. Yeah, she's a brilliant human being. So we divided the 4 sessions between, our first session was bees and butterflies. We looked at photosynthesis, we looked at the water cycle, and we looked at trees. There she is. Lovely. All right, so we sort of took her structure of working through the garden, bringing groups on tours through biodiversity tours, and we used that to kind of make a dance experience out of it. So if you can see in the top left corner, we have a little map of the garden. So we have like compost bins, we have areas where veg is being grown, there's a small orchard, there's a bee hive as well. So we would sort of dot our way around, and at each sort of station or hub, Polly would give a bit of context, bit of information, and then immediately we'd bring it into the body with a sort of activity or game. All right, so, oh yeah, this is a poem there that the kids created at the end that we made a funny dance to. That photo there in the middle is a tree that we used to understand the root system, and we did a measuring, kind of scientific measuring activity with that. For the teens, we found that they kind of needed a little bit more of an anchor to kind of get going and get chatting. So we brought in some kind of visual art examples to just get the conversation going. And these ones are of different landscapes. Yeah, this is just me fangirling over the beautiful garden. Yeah, lots of kind of micro spots within it. Great. And so I'm just going to fly through this. So as an example of some of the activities, so we went to the hive, learned a bit about the different roles of bees, and then we did an activity. I'll just select 2 there. So of the drone bee, the idea that the drone bee is looking for the queen during mating season. And it has these massive big eyes to be able to do that. And we played with this idea of putting the eyes on different parts of our body, looking around, whether it was the knee or the ear or the back of the head. What would it be like to see through the body? With the queen bee, who can kind of galvanize the hive into to move quickly or to get angry. We played a follow the leader game where each person took a turn being the queen, giving us a dance move. Some were like very high frequency and some were low, and that was a really great way to actually embody the way that she can influence the hive. And then lastly, just another example we did on our last session, the tree focus. And we did a game where we all grabbed hands, got all intertwined and knotted up, and then we tried to send a signal through a pulse, through the hands, from, say, Jimmy on one side to Betty on the other, and had to work together to send this root connection through. All right, Flying along. I told you this was ambitious. All right. So the last one I'm going to share with you is a performance project created with 3 other artists. So that's Manuel McCarthy Valderrama, who's kind of coming from costume and textile sculpture, performance, and also digital arts. Paula Catazone, who's an embodiment facilitator, amazing yoga teacher, visual and performance artist, and arts educator, myself. Coming from the dance background and community facilitation, and then Karen Aguiar, who's a community activist, producer, and dancer. So we had a mission to only use recycled and waste materials, and at the time, Recreate was not able to sustain their work there. They were a kind of creative reuse and getting out surplus materials. So they had a ton of this, what do you call it? It fills insulation, thank you. So we created this giant, bizarre caterpillar out of installation. We had these big tube arms, so really eye-catching, humorous. And you're kind of just like, what is that? Hopefully drawing you in. So the performance were based around our 4 body ecosystems. We were interested in the use of recycled plastics, foils, the breath. We were interested in how microplastics land in the lungs and how the general, how generally climate collapse and the changing air that we breathe is causing this sort of tightness and how will we breathe in the future? Also ritual and interaction with human and non-human bodies. So as I said, we used waste, recycled plastics, and our inspiration is really coming from like Rebecca Horn's body extensions, artichoke dance, garments of plastics, Nick Cave sound suits, and the Bauhaus ballet costumes, really playing with scale. And Irish artist Selena Muldoon's work as well. So we had a workshop, which you'll see in the top left, and then that's Manuel, who's sort of coming from the fashion angle. So he's made this bizarre kind of cape. We hosted a ritual, a made-up ritual, kind of poking fun at, I don't know, however, people, crown themselves for doing a whole lot of nothing. Here is the outfit I created, and this would have been from also my own plastic collection. And the process of only using stuff that I was collecting was super illuminating. Even as somebody who's really conscious, just the reality of how much plastic is just really like inevitable. So that's still something I'm working on. Here's some more images from that. We also, as part of that Recreate offering, we're given these medical capes. So we got really twisted in these, and again, playing with like the struggle of breath and ultimately collapse. We collected these giant foils from trees that we had preset, and we're exploring what it would take to free them from trees. And then Paula there with the sage, cleansing, purifying. We also have here a Palestinian dabka sequence, which feels really important. This is a sequence by Omar, who's a Limerick-based dance artist, because there's no ecological justice without social justice. So yeah, we had a bit of a dance, and the kids joined in as well, and that kind of brought us into that final state of joy, which we played the pop song, Bodies in Trouble. And that's Paula, her green dress to finish us out. Great, so yeah, I think that wraps it up, but just to, I suppose, bring it together, for me, the joy of the unique constellations of people all bringing their skills and perspectives. Like you can see how different all of the aesthetics are because of the people that create them. And also trying to find ways to connect with the public in ways that they're a part of and that are joyful, because there's no other way but that. Humorous sometimes, heavy, all the things. Okay, leave it there.
Thank you so much, Mia. Great. So from a project really rooted in stories of Clonmel and the planting of orchards, zooming out to Mia's work and how it kind of looks at biodiversity, climate change from a kind of bigger zooming lens, and now moving on to our own very rooted into this land, Cloughjordan-based dance artist Julie Lockett. So Julie is an independent dance artist and writer based here in Cloughjordan Ecovillage. She works interchangeably with the Ecovillage land and in the studio as artist in residence at Instant Dissidence's eco dance space here in the Ecovillage when she needs shelter. She has a certificate in permaculture design and uses permaculture as a lens to create her work. So over to you, Julie.
Thanks to Rita for asking me to be part of this today, and it's really lovely to follow on from Teresia and Mia's work to my own. So I'm going to do a few things. The first thing I'm going to do is read you a poem called Orchard, which I wrote after dancing with our orchard here in Cloughjordan. I'm then going to talk to you about a dance observatory, which is inspired from a land observatory, which I learned about at a conference here in Cloughjordan Ecovillage last month, Feeding Ourselves. I'm then going to talk about the development of our artistic program in Phelan and Newell here in Cloughjordan Ecovillage, read a piece of writing from a piece of work I did last year, and then I'm going to read two more pieces of writing from a new series of work that I'm working on called Land Gut, questions which need geographical answers. It's quite a lot to do. So this is called Orchard. She took herself out for a dance, threading through the orchard, bare branches as crossbows with blossoms loaded, slowly exploding petals unfurling over the weak, pink soft beauty released as bullets. Hand tightly held, she echoes the blossom, arms raised in an open structure, she pivots with the trees, fruit not even hinted at, but the promise is there. Suddenly the blossom's gone, the fruit pushing behind, they're coming. Trees pulsing with growing apples, there will be a lot of fruit, their weight as they grow, a slow unbalancing. The June drop didn't calm the need to plan before a late, desperate stripping of the fruit in early September to save the skeleton of branches. Red reaching around the apples, their bright colors lighting her path to the Enterprise Center. The promise of Snow White's poison poised in their branches. Everywhere apples set out on the table as gifts, mashed by cars on the roads, their insides carved out by wasps, fermenting, feasting as they ferment. September celebration, the year stewed, pressed, fermented, frozen and dehydrated, stored in jars and on rack, sustenance, the colors nourish us through the winter. So you don't have to clap every time, it's fine. So then I just want to talk to you about this piece of writing that I've written called A Dance Observatory. So I've written this with support from a Tipperary Artists Award. So as I said, this idea for a dance observatory was inspired at the Feeding Ourselves conference last month, a land observatory. Whenever I hear the word land or geography, it's kind of like a magnet for me. I just move towards it. I just really connect with it. And so at Feeding Ourselves, hosted by Davy and Ollie, who are in the room here, and Ruth Hegarty, another amazing woman. So basically, as I understand it, a land observatory is set up to monitor and track the use of land, monitor soil, biodiversity, and also ownership, which is a huge challenge that we're facing in Ireland, as in so many countries. There's now land consolidation happening in Ireland. Companies are buying up land, and this is blocking access to families, intergenerational ownership of farms, and it's very difficult for young people to kind of get onto that farm ladder, as it were, property ladder, in terms of farm ownership. So So this inspired me then to map and locate what my dance work teaches me. So this is a piece of writing about that. A dance observatory. Being an artist requires the ability to work. I work interchangeably with the Ecovillage land where I live here in Cloughjordan and in the studio as artist in residence at Instant Dissidence's eco-dance space in the Ecovillage when I need shelter. The land as studio. As soon as I leave the house, I'm in the studio. I forage for movement and writing material around the Ecovillage, dancing with my notebook close by. My work is both self-pollinated, generating a circular economy of ideas, and open-pollinated by the land, the wildlife, and the other people working with and enjoying the land here. When I work with the land, I am part of a chorus. When I work in the sheltered studio, it is a bounded, regulated space where I am the engine of my work. Tactical, self-seeding, off balance. This pendulation between the two sites assures continual opportunities to reframe and recontextualize the creation of my work. It fosters a multiplicity of images and aids the development of a constellation of meaning. Diversity is necessary for resilience. This promise of multiplicity is vital in maintaining my commitment as an artist and is necessary to engage an audience in viewing my work. Multiplicity feeds diversity and diversity feeds multiplicity. In permaculture, diversity is recognized as a principle necessary for resilience, and resilience allows us to withstand shocks more easily. Reciprocity. I work on the soccer pitch. The farmers and farm volunteers gather in the corner of the pitch every morning to meet before they start their work. Later, Pat leads his horses into the field diagonally across from me. The cow grows under the black netting in the field adjacent. The birds fly overhead and the occasional insect buzzes past. A dance studio needs a dancer. The land needs its artist too. My body thrives on conundrums. I work with my body to explore questions and conundrums I've derived from paradoxical concepts, some of which I've assembled, and others I've collected from various sources. I'm not interested in finding derived linear answers, as I already have enough of them in other areas of my life. I enjoy apprenticing myself to questions and feeding paradoxes to my body to dance, which then generate unique experiences for me, enabling me to learn and apprehend invited but unexpected images. What is an Indigenous dance? How does a woman originally from Essex, now Tipperary, learn something about this? I practice, what if I am performing an Indigenous dance? I keep this question current and notice the feedback. She travels the ribbon of her Indigenous story, the constant severing. When I dance, this is an opportunity to actively practice noticing my connection to nature, to the orchard from one day to the next, a community of trees, a growing art installation. Micro practices. I incorporate into my dance work any new practices I'm learning, like from Alexander Technique about practicing tensegrity, where my cells are softly braced like the structure of a geodesic dome. I learned from dance artist Deborah Hay to practice noticing the perfection of the geometry unfolding. Lithography of dance. When I dance, I write a lithography, the noting of my bodily chemical reactions and responses to the score, a dance, a live mapping, which I then document in writing, a cascade of opposition. Self-sufficiency is not my aim. Without the deadline of a public performance, my work slurs and remains unsharpened. I need other artists to support me in developing my work, and this accelerates my learning. I meet weekly with Rita Marcalo, who is my dance community in Cloughjordan, and we sometimes work together. Rita continually broadens my frame of reference for my work and helps me to deepen my understanding of it. I am always inspired by Rita's depth of knowledge, experience, agency, and boldness in her work. Performance. I notice the potential for the flood of self-doubt. I practice learning to be ready to observe the breach and return to my practice, employing all the tools I've fashioned for myself over the years. I learned from Deborah Hay, every practice is a performance, every performance is a practice, self-publishing. Her acre, she carries everything she needs, including herself. I self-publish my written work on the front panels of the bakehouse in the Ecovillage, Rye at Rye Bakehouse and Bread School, which I co-own with my husband, Joe Fitzmaurice. The act of presenting my work in its final stages on these 2-meter square panels gives me the perspective to review and make the final edits to my writing, as well as animate the Ecovillage streetscape with art. For the thousands of visitors which the Ecovillage educational charity hosts every year, it's a window into the lives of the artists living in this unique place. So now I just want to talk a little bit about our artistic program of Phelan and Úlla in Cloughjordan. So this kind of really started last year in September. So Rita Marcalo got funding for her fabulous project Dance in the Orchard, which was performed at our Phelan and Úlla here in Cloughjordan last year, as well as at the Apple Fest, which Theresia curates. And I think it was the fact that this anchor artistic project, which got significant funding, and Rita also worked with 4 dancers, this for me just opened up the space of a potential program, an artistic program. So at the time, I was writing a lot about my work, and it felt like a natural progression for me to want to tattoo my writings on the land of the Ecovillage or write on the Ecovillage skin. So I approached Veronica, our education officer here, and the other group of people who run our Phelan and Úlla. So what I ended up doing, and I have a picture of it here, is chalking my writings on the tarmac where Phelan and Úlla happens in Cloughjordan. And I was delighted that people were going to walk over them, cars might drive over them, and the rain might wash them away immediately. I liked the temporariness of that. And so what was great about Rita's anchoring project for the artistic program of Phelan and Úlla last year is another local artist, Aaron Bailey, also brought his work to Phelan and Úlla, Accepting Change and Changing Acceptance, which was a piece of work that wove together the voices of local activists and contemplatives in Cloughjordan and the surrounding region with thoughtful, heartfelt audio experiences. And Fionnuala McKenna, another artist who's here with us in the room today, also presented a piece of her work, a piece of film, which was a voice of the past, breathe loudly, a deep investigation into the soundscapes of boglands. And we have a nearby Scochaboy bog. And as I understand it, Fionnuala worked with the bog, and she was also another artist who presented her work for the Phelan and Úlla. So then for 2025, Sustainable Projects Ireland, the Ecovillage charity, has got Tipperary Creative Ireland funding for an artistic program this year. So Rita Marcalo will be doing a project, Clothes Swap, a fashion and dance project. I'll be presenting a new series of writings, Land Gut, questions which need geographical answers. And then Cloughjordan Circus Club will be bringing mayhem to the festival, which is brilliant. And they're making a performance with apples, and they'll be running a stall, and we'll have chefs on stilts for the Apple Bake-Off competition, which I'm really excited to see. So I'm just going to read now a short piece of writing from the series that I did last year, Land Scores and Landlines, about chalking my writings on the ground. So this is called Keeping Score. Let's see what other pictures I have here. Oh, yeah. So, the canvas is ugly, rough, hard-pitted. The chalk is scored by the tarmac on which she writes. An artist's work shapes her tools. Chalking moves and heats her. She pigeon-toes to mark size 7 lines, choreographing her spacing. Her body, her material, her facility to shift along the ground dictates the scale of the letters. The chalk is blown by a small breeze like sand cresting a dune. A colour cast aside rolls across her lines. Connor drives up the right-hand side of the page. A curb for a title. Her words cling to the tarmac scenes, an invitation to stop and read. She leads the seeing of her audience. Their eyes pace the tarmac field. Their bodies turn as they follow the curved lines. Nicky approaches her first. He has spotted her rehearsed lines elsewhere on a patch of road. He speaks his delight in finding a puzzle to solve. He has discovered their author. She races the potential rain, Ivor paces past, Rua scuttles, the sound of the reading wings of the birds flying overhead. She lowers her body to word level and their meaning instantly evaporates, keeping score except the land is scoring her. It feels poignant to chalk her feelings on the ground. What is their value if their presence is fleeting, yet their fragility is their freedom. They no longer belong to her. They've been erased by footsteps, car tires, and rain. So now I'm just going to read a couple of extracts from 2 pieces of work. So just when I talk about pendulating between the studio and working with the land, this is just a little example of 2 pieces of writing. So this is Poised. I'm back, she's back, she connects with the floor like screed, her body immediately pouring across the space, a remembered release. The 5 kilos of her head supported on her shoulder, she's prone and poised. Sky frame, she shifts to reframe it, an endless picture. She smudges an eye, drawing the floor with her fingers. Her body a concertina expanding with her practice, her learning. She knows she's needed here now. She pauses, clouds fly by in blue, her move. Another green-yellow bruise on her lower leg, external massage when she was missing, the bruise a recall. Her arms gather to propel her across the floor. She eyes the wall, land boundaries visible from the floor. See, she is her craft. Her leg bones fly with a torso anchor, feet climbing the air, pacing in weightlessness. To be light, freedom in age, she is her craft, voyager. How long is her dance? Infinite if she pays attention. Where does this currency come from? Her breath. And then I'll just do a very quick half a minute. So, and this is called Land Gut. Moving leisurely, she practices simplicity, dancing an iconic moving sculpture, tracking her kinesphere and the geography of her body. She learns the length of her limbs. She embarks on a diagonal with the confidence of a gymnast, taking a mental pause before performing an impressive stream of jumps, tumbles, and somersaults. She performs her usual fascinating shit. Satellite tracking, she's frequently asked, is your location turned on? She lays down her arms and dances in no man's land, unaccounted for. She buffers, bluffing. She performs simplicity, the primitive her guide. She practices reciprocity. A dance studio needs a dancer. Traveling swiftly, she gathers information with her feet from the gown. She notices the difference between her right and left foot. Working together and independently, she scribbles through time, transmitting the findings simultaneously throughout the rest of her body. What if it's her shadow that's performing and she's the transitory visitor, her duplicitous body? She plays off balance to fire her momentum, a time capsule of movement accumulating as she moves through space. She performs repeated dramatic drops to the ground to convince the farmers and the farm volunteers of her commitment to her dance. No one is watching and nobody is fooled, including herself. She is her own streaming service. She tunnels above ground for ideas, curating every moment, rendering. She codes like 2 AI bots, communicating. She ties herself in quick release knots. She is an escape artist. She doubles down on diligence with her dance. Her rewards are more questions.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you so much for being here. So, just a few, as you were all presenting, I was writing things down that I'm curious about. So I'm just going to ask a few questions. So, Theresia, actually, for you, I was really curious to find out, after the original project of planting the orchard, how was the transition? What was the transition between that as a community project, and was it the festival that then came after, or was it those books? How did that kind of lead into some artifacts or happenings arising out of that project?
They all kind of came together at the same time, or certainly the planting came out of this creative research project, and then the solicitation by people, and that has been going on for 4 years. So we kind of discontinued the planting about 2 or 3 years ago, but with the occasional exception, we occasionally but the festival itself is somewhat independent in that, I curate projects that are not directly inspired by the apple trees. I think that the apple trees is its own project, has its own life, and it will continue well after the festival is probably no longer there, I imagine, because the trees will be there, and you know, the stories and the memories. I suppose the conversations I've had with people over the years about the apple trees has inspired certain projects. Like we do these books around different people in Clonmel, and so that came out of that from 2020 onwards. We started this book project around telling stories about different individuals in the community.
So it was almost like the storytelling, planting tree happenings at the beginning, then highlighted the importance of storytelling in Clonmel in general. And then you worked with Clonmel residents to create these books that are about storytelling, not necessarily about apples, but about who they are and their lives. Is that right?
Yeah, and I suppose also the diversity of narratives there, because actually the first one was about migrants, because I became aware that there were so many non-nationals in Clonmel.
Yeah.
So, you know, just by having all these conversations, you become aware of, you know, the different interests and concerns, and some of them are related to, you know, apples and the business of making apples, but lots are sort of secondary, also about the sense of place, actually, because I think Clonmel is, while it has a very sort of die-hard communities of traditionalists, it also has a huge multicultural community.
Great.
So,
and a little bird has told me that our very own The Night Orchard might be at Clonmel this year.
Yeah, well, we had a lovely encounter with the team, so it'd be great if they came back.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Mia, as you were talking, I was listening to you, and especially when you were talking about by creating that costume out of plastic, you became aware of how much plastic you had at home. So I'm just wondering about the power that the arts have or not to engender change. So in becoming aware for yourself, did that lead to you changing your behavior around plastic bags or whatever? And are you aware if that your work is also having an impact on the people the other artists who are making the work with you, or your audiences, in terms of change?
I think, well, yes. Yes, so I suppose it's like, for me, it's experienced as waves. I think that the moment, I don't know about you, it feels like artists are so under resourced. Everyone is, you know, like there's a lot going on. So sometimes I'm able to, just pour more intentionality into those things. But certainly, like, any of those approaches have always awakened me to, and the arts in general, waken us to more possibilities, to imagining a future where I can't make a cape out of plastic bottles, you know, and I think just like changing as much as we can. I'm quite lucky in Dublin 8 because we've got small changes and we have the food co-op as well. But for other parts of the city like that don't have access to that, I don't know. So I think as well, having some sort of feedback mechanism, like in the first example, so you're seeing people having an encounter with a tree and then immediately, viscerally writing that out. It helps kind of feedback. Is this resonating? What is the depth of that interaction? It's always helpful.
Thank you. And for you, Julie, I suppose a similar question. I mean, you're an activist and an artist. You have lived and worked in the Ecovillage. You're a member of BERT. So how do you see those two things are connecting in terms of your art practice and then your practice as a resident of the Ecovillage, which has a kind of activist drive? But is your art focused on change, engendering change in your audiences, in yourself? How does change linking through those two sides of who you are? You've got the bakery as well.
Just an image came to mind there. I don't know if you've ever seen these strong people and they have massive weight on the ground and they tie themselves to it and then they try and run along. I think I feel like that about the Ecovillage and my work with Joe. It's there, and maybe terrible weight, isn't it? It does feel quite weighty sometimes. It's just there. It's like I don't even have to think about it because my experience of living in the Ecovillage is so immersive that I can't not write about what my experience is. So I don't deliberately focus on that. It's just the context that I live in. I deliberately moved from Dublin because I wanted to live in a different context, which meant that I would need to learn new things. So I just feel like it nearly happens by process of osmosis. I don't really need to think about it. And as an artist, I'm not interested in aiming to make work that is politically or environmentally active, because that's not what I do as an artist. I do that in other areas of my life.
Great. Okay, great. Well, I just got the little sign to say that we're out of time. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Theresia, Mia, and Julie for accepting the invitation to be here today. Huge thank you to Cloughjordan Ecovillage for organizing the series and inviting Instant Dissidence to be part of it, to hold the technical and marketing team behind the scenes, and to you online for staying with us for the hour. This webinar, alongside all the other 3, are going to be on the webinar page, the Ecovillage webinar page. And just a final note to say, join us for Failnanol, our Apple Fest here in Cloughjordan on the Saturday, 20th of September, where we'll be launching the publication that will kind of bring all these 4 webinars together. So thank you again to you over there, and to all of you in the room. Thank you.
Cat's head, pig snout, golden spire, Sam Young, Bally, fat and greasy, Pippin, Dockney, Honey Ball, Summer John, Gibbons, Russet, April Queen, 8 Square, Lady Suddenly, under the golden canopy. Late September, go down to the village, take the apple walk. The sun is low these evenings in the fall. The trees are all aglow, they're putting on a show. Ooh, we waited through the summer when honeybee and crickets sing, and on the blossom flower on to autumn bring the apple town wonder. Hear the blackbird sing of the golden spire and the April Queen. Ooh, honey, peach, and golden, hear them sweetly fall. Oh, there's the bloody butcher in among them all. Sam Young has fallen for the sweet finola lee, so heavy, ripe, and ready beneath the canopy. Ooh, take the apple walk, gather from the ground. The breeze has blown down, you'll find them all around. Some are bruised, some are smooth, some won't let go at all. They are waiting for the right time to fall. Ooh, take the apple, take the apple, take blessed April Queen, 8 square